What's up everyone, this is Soul with another video, and we're going to continue our Shadowlands Alpha coverage by going over the new Covenant abilities that were updated ever since the second Alpha build. Like I had just said, this is the Alpha, everything is subject to change, there may be things to be added or altered or taken out or added in and so on and so forth. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over the different abilities that have been introduced, and depending on what we're looking at, we're going to compare them to the previous abilities that were introduced earlier. So I'll have just kind of some pictures of these abilities alongside them so you can see for yourself, hey, is this great or is this not so great, and so on and so forth. So, well, let's just go ahead and see what we've got this week. Starting off with Sentinel, this is a Night Fae ability for hunters. Here's what happens. You summon a Sentinel at a target location that applies Sentinel's mark to all enemy targets below it for 15 seconds. While the Sentinel is active, each ability that you use against a target affected by this mark, or things that are inside this AoE, call forth a spirit beast to strike your target for arcane damage. Now this seems pretty direct. It's a 2-minute cooldown, it's just some straight and easy to understand throughput, unlike some of the other abilities that we're going to show throughout today's video. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Now I do kind of wonder if this spirit beast that comes out, it's kind of an effect. It's not just simply direct damage, but something comes out. Excuse me. So I wonder if this has any, like, let's say for Beastmasters, is their mastery going to have any sort of difference? Those are small things that I would like to know about. But overall, some pretty direct damage, easy to understand, cool. Moving on to Soul Rot for the Warlocks, here's what's going on. It's a 1.5 second cast, it has a 1-minute cooldown, and what happens is that you wither away all life force of your current target and up to 3 additional targets nearby, causing them to suffer nature damage over 8 seconds, so they all take the same amount of damage. It's a nice little cleave. Drain Life will also be cast on any enemy affected by your Soul Rot, and it consumes 20% of your maximum health one cast. So don't do it when you're dying. Do it when you're kind of taking damage, but not when you're dying. For all I know, this might straight up kill you. And then you can see the buff is called Soul Rot. You suffer damage every 5 or so seconds. Now that I'm looking at that for a little bit longer, that is kind of weird. You're suffering nature damage every 5 seconds, but the debuff itself only lasts 8 seconds. So I think that's an error. Maybe it's going to be maybe the damage ticks are going to be a little bit more evened out. I think this one is nice and just really easy to understand. It's a pretty powerful cleave spell, as a short cooldown. It happens to heal you as well, and the whole Drain Life component, that part is pretty cool. Now it does say Drain Life will also be cast on any enemy affected. Does that mean that on top of the damage of Soul Rot, the enemy is also taking Drain Life damage? So that's like a double dip, and that might be potentially like really cool. Or it just might be the healing effect that you get from it and not the additional damage. So I'd like to know that, because that'll make it even a more useful ability. At a 1.5 second cast and a 1-minute cooldown, it's an easy, just like set it, boop, and then you're good to go. You can continue casting. Next we have Fae Transfusion, which is for Night Fae Hunters again, although I have a feeling that this is going to be for Shaman. Kind of hard to tell, maybe I'm wrong, I just want to let you know. So, tooltip says it transfers the life force of up to 8 enemies in the targeted area, dealing nature damage every 0.5 seconds for 3 seconds. And then pressing Fae Transfusion again within 10 seconds will release 75% of all damage from Fae Transfusion and heals up to 8 allies near yourself, and probably you too. So this is a channeled cast. It's a little bit interesting. It has a 2-minute cooldown, by the way. So this is kind of an interesting one. So it's something that you can target. You'll be able to target multiple enemies, up to 8 as said, but from the looks of it, you don't necessarily have to complete the channel in order to take advantage of Fae Transfusion. So you can get like a little bit of, you can get a little bit of that damage in, but if you're forced to move, oh well, that sucks, you're just forced to move. But you can still press the button and still get that heal off. Now, this has some pretty cool implications for Shaman, notably Resto Shaman, if they're able to use it, and then they can bank it for the next 10 10 seconds. So if they're able to maybe time it in such a way that before taking a big damaging attack, Shaman can use this ability, get a little bit of damage in, and then once the attack goes off, hit the button, which I presume is going to be an instant button. You just press it once and then ta-da, you poop out all of that damage that you had done as healing. So this is just one more cooldown to add to the Shaman arsenal. Again, I'm assuming that this is for Shaman, but it's a little something you can add to the arsenal for them. Sounds pretty cool. Moving on to Primordial Wave. This is a Shaman spell if you happen to choose the Necrolords, and this tooltip is really, really busy. This is actually the reason why I'm doing a recording here and not doing one from stream. This is actually an offline recording because I had such a hard time understanding how this ability works. But I think I'm prepared to finally talk about it. So it has a 45-second cooldown. It has a 1.5 second cast, and here's what happens. It depends on your spec. So let's start off with if you happen to be Ellie or enhancements. So you blast your target with a Primordial Wave. You deal shadow damage, and you deal a combination of spell and attack power. You deal shadow damage, and you apply Flame Shock to that target. On top of that, it makes your next major ability for your enhancement or your elemental spec do something special. So if you happen to cast Lava Burst or Lightning Bolt, it's also going to hit all targets that are already afflicted by your Flame Shock. I don't know why it doesn't say enhancement here. I'm going to presume that it's going to, because if not, that's going to like totally drive me bananas. So basically, you hit the target, it does damage, it applies Flame Shock, and then it makes your next Flame Shock, it's going to make your next Lava Burst or Lightning Bolt hit all targets that happen to have Flame Shock already on them. And so the same kind of principle applies if you happen to be a Restoration. So if you use this target on a friendly target, it's going to heal that target and apply Riptide to them. And also, on the next healing wave that you cast, it's going to apply Healing Wave to all of your targets that have Riptide on it. I think I got it. So this spell, in practice, it's not going to be it doesn't seem as complicated as it reads. It's very confusing to use because you're going to be using this ability and then you're going to use another ability. So it's a combination sort of dealy. On top of that, though, you will want to kind of prep this spell by having a bunch of Riptides and or Flame Shocks applied to enemies, to targets, before using this spell combination, so that way you can get the most throughput out of it. The next ability that we have is Shifting Power for mages. It's a channeled cast. It has a 45-second cooldown. And what happens is that you draw power from the ground beneath you for 6 seconds. You deal damage every 1.5 seconds for within 15 yards. But while channeling, your mage ability cooldowns are going to be reduced every 1.5 seconds. So similar to Fey Transfusion, this isn't something that you necessarily have to complete. You can just channel it, and then for whatever you get, then you get. So you can reduce your cooldowns by a little bit, and it feels like the strategy here is to probably use it every time that 45-second cooldown is up and just get whatever you can. Now, there might be instances where you might want to wait like a few seconds, a few seconds after it's off of cooldown so you can get a full 6-second duration, but you probably want to channel it more often than not whenever you have the opportunity. That way you can take advantage of reducing your cooldowns and otherwise get into the good stuff, because that's what mages are all about, right? Chaining cooldowns and then going nuts. The fact that it does a little bit of damage, it's a nice little bonus, but I don't think that's going to be like the big deal. 15 yards isn't that far of a range, but it certainly does help. I think most of what you're going to be doing is not exactly, hey, let me get into position so I can use Shifting Power. It's more like, hey, the cooldown's up. Now's the time for me to use it. Cool, let's do it. I'm good for like 6 seconds. 6 seconds is a lot, but so this is an ability that you definitely want to, if you decide to have your mage join the Night Fae, you're going to be really making very, very heavy use out of this ability. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste. All right, so next up we have Bone Dust Brew. This is something that I mentioned the first time that I mentioned Covenant abilities. It looks like now it's been updated. This is a monk spell of if they happen to join up with the Necrolords, and here's what's going on. They hurl a brew created from the bones of your enemies at the ground, although it has a 40-yard range, and a 1-minute cooldown, coating all targets struck for 10 seconds. In the meantime, your abilities have a 15% chance to affect the target a second time at 25% effectiveness as shadow damage or healing. Now, it looks like there are additional effects on top of that. So one, it's like you can potentially do like not so much double damage or double the healing, but you get a chance to do 25% more of the original effect. So, as Mistweaver, Gust of Mists will heal targets with your Bone Dust brew active for an additional little bit of healing. That part doesn't sound as impressive, but for Brewmasters, Tiger Palm and Cake Smash will reduce the cooldown of your brews by an additional 1 second when they're hitting enemies that are afflicted by Bone Dust Brew. And then for Windwalkers, using Spinning Crane Cake will refund chi when striking enemies with your Bone Dust Brew active. So, without knowing monks very well, this particular ability still doesn't sound all that impressive. Brewmasters, I would argue, would probably have it the best out of this because they're reducing cooldowns and otherwise getting up uptimes to cleanse their stagger or anything like that. For Windwalkers, it looks like it's kind of limited to AoE. And for Mistweavers, that doesn't seem to be all that effective. I mean, it's a little bit more throughput that you're able to get out of it, but for a 1-minute cooldown, even then using a global on top of that to get only 10 seconds of additional throughput across all the specs, I'm not super impressed by it so far. Now, this is for the Necrolord Covenant. We don't have this in test yet, so I think once we really sit down and try it out, then we'll be able to get a much better idea of how this feels. But in the meantime, I'm still not very impressed. And we're moving on to Paladins for the last two abilities, starting with Vanquisher's Hammer. This is if they happen to join the Necrolords. It has a 30-second cooldown and a 30-yard range. You throw a hammer at your target, dealing shadow damage, and then it empowers your next ability based on your spec. So for Ret, it's going to make your next Templar's Verdict automatically trigger Divine Storm, which is a nice little bit of throughput. It's like, hey, cool, let me hit this main target, and all of a sudden I hit a bunch of other targets at no holy power cost. Not bad. For Holy, the next Word of Glory will automatically trigger Light of Dawn. So this will alter behavior just slightly for Holy Paladins. They'll just want to position themselves to be facing the raid. Word of Glory, cool. More Light of Dawn stuff. Goes back to your beacon target. It's a nice little bit of throughput. For Protection, Word of Glory will automatically trigger Shield of the Righteous. So this one isn't so bad in case, like, I guess if you're just having an emergency, it's like, oh no, I'm taking pretty big damage, and maybe I'm low on holy power. Maybe because the way that Protection Paladins work, they can potentially use a Word of Glory for free at no holy power costs. So if they can time it right, they can throw a Vanquisher's Hammer, use the Word of Glory, and get their mitigation back up, get their Shield of the Righteous so they can build their holy power back up again. Although I admit that there are plenty of tricks to maintain our Shield of the Righteous uptime, at least at the moment. Alpha, you know? So overall, this ability it's a little bit awkward because you're prepping an ability that deals like an okay amount of damage. At least it has a 30-yard range and it's instant. I have a feeling that it's on the global as well. But as for like where it fits in an overall rotation, that part I'm not too sure about. I mean, it's good throughput. It's pretty easy to understand, but as like kind of a when it comes to trying to fit it in a combination or rotation, it feels a little awkward. It feels a little unwieldy or clunky. That might be the word. But again, Necrolords, this is something that we're going to have to like really sit down and play with before we can decide. And then finally, there is what is the more interesting ability that comes to Paladins. If Paladins happen to join the Night Fae, they can get Aura of the Seasons. And with that comes 4 different auras, and I'll go over all of them. When you have the Aura of Summer active, party members within 40 yards will bask in your Aura of Summer, causing their attacks to have a high chance to deal 100% of spell power, which seems to be kind of a lot, as holy damage. And like all the auras that I'll be talking about, it will turn into the next one. It's going to go through this kind of set cycle. It's not random. You go through this order, but the aura is going to change after spending 20 holy power each time. So going to Autumn, party members within 40 yards will fall in your Aura of Autumn, causing their cooldowns to recover 10% faster, which is okay. 10% isn't huge, but when you apply that to like everything, like a 30-second cooldown becomes a 27-second cooldown and so on and so forth, it at least adds up. It's for the whole raid or for the whole team, so there's some significance there. With the Aura of Winter, enemies within 40 yards will chill in your Aura of Winter, reducing their attack speed by 10% and their movement speed by 20%. So great for, like, let's say, like boss fights, if you want a moment to have a little bit less boss damage going out or boss melee damage going out, that can be very useful. If you happen to be in a PvP situation, this would be pretty hilarious. You just kind of like put on the Aura of Winter and then just kind of sit there and watch as the entire enemy team is moving a little bit slower than normal. That would be pretty awesome too. And then finally, there is the Aura of Spring. Party members within 40 yards revitalizing your Aura of Spring, causing their healing done and healing received to increase by 10%. Now, again, these auras change every 20 holy power, and it's weird because if you think about it, what if you have 4 paladins, right? And you have each paladin sitting on each aura. But of course you want these paladins to be doing things too, so are they going to have like some is like the top end of the mythic raid spectrum going to have rock 4 paladins and then have some sort of dance or rhythm where all 4 of them are spending the same amount of holy power at the same rate at the same time to ensure that each of these auras are all up? Great. I mean, that's not something that I'm going to be doing, that's for sure, but I would hate to be the team to be the pally team that is even pressured to do something like that. But these auras are pretty cool. The timing, of course, is going to be very interesting. Like, let's say if you want to have the holy damage one going, which so far sounds like the most impressive one out of all of them, you're going to want to time it in such a way that your Aura of Summer is up, and then not spend too much holy power during, say, like a bloodlust or a time that you know that everyone's going to be like popping cooldowns and all that. But at the same time, you need to prep your Aura of Summer to be ready when you are ready to pop all these cooldowns. So it's like, oh man, I'm like 40 holy power behind. I need to get caught up so I can cycle through and get to my Aura of Summer because the bloodlust is going to be coming up pretty soon. It sounds like this can be a really awkward sort of aura system, but the concept is like really neat, and the benefits, there are varying benefits for each aura. It's just so far really cool and fascinating. I'm just not quite sure if it's gonna sell me like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to use this, or I'm definitely going to, when I get to Aura of Summer, I'm not going to spend any holy power, or at least I'll spend enough holy power that it'll have like infinite uptime or something like that. Is that going to be worth it? Am I going to use a holy powerless build? No, probably not, but just something interesting to consider. So that's going to be it for all the different abilities that were introduced in this particular build. I should have comparisons to all of them available as we were going through, but let me know what you think so far. Are these abilities like cool so far? Do you have a favorite yet? Do they all like really suck? Do you want to be able to, are we going to go back to this whole situation of, hey, I want to switch my Covenant ability as I see fit? Let me know your thoughts in a comment below, and that's going to be it. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed yourself, and to subscribe for more of this and all the Shadowlands coverage. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.